Hi friends, in today's lecture, we will discuss a very important topic in hematology, that is aplastic anemia. So first of all, it is a bone marrow failure syndrome in which bone marrow fails to produce its blood cells. Now it is important to note that aplastic anemia is very similar in features with myelodysplastic syndrome and paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria. So exact differentiation between these three entities is very difficult and important. So let's begin. So we will be discussing aplastic anemia in the following headings. First, we will see what is the definition, what is the epidemiology, etiology in which it can be idiopathic, acquired or inherited, what is the pathophysiology of aplastic anemia, clinical features in which we will see relevant history and then physical examination. We will see lab studies including blood smear, bone marrow examination and specific test, how to make the diagnosis of aplastic anemia, what is the prognosis of such patients, and finally what all treatment options are available, in which there can be stem cell transplantation, immunosuppression, L-Trembopeg, androgens and supportive care. So you can download the PDF of this lecture and all other lectures from the MediLectures app. You can also attempt a test on aplastic anemia on the app, and you can also take part in interesting quizzes related to internal medicine. Link is present in the description. So friends, starting with the definition, aplastic anemia is simply defined as pancytopenia along with bone marrow hypocellularity. Now when we consider the types, most cases of aplastic anemia are idiopathic. So it is the most common cause. There can be inherited or constitutional causes like Fanconi's anemia, dyskeratosis congenita. These disorders usually occur in childhood and have typical physical anomalies. These disorders we will discuss in detail in the coming slides. Also, there can be telomere diseases and gene mutations which can also occur in adults. Now, when we consider the acquired causes, this aplastic anemia has an abrupt onset of low blood cell counts in a previously well young adult. So, a previously well young adult presents with abrupt onset of low blood cell counts. Sometimes these can have history of preceding seronegative hepatitis, history of any incriminated drug or any immunological disease. Now, as discussed, aplastic anemia is very closely related to paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria and myelodysplastic syndrome, and clear distinction between these disorders may not be possible. Now, this is the slide showing, first of all, this is the normal. The above slide, that is A, is bone marrow biopsy, that is normal bone marrow biopsy, and the figure B is normal bone marrow aspiration spear. So in this, normally 30 to 70% of the bone marrow is cellular. That is, it contains a mix of myeloid cells, erythroid cells and lymphoid cells. On the other hand, these two figures are of aplastic anemia. So this is a bone marrow biopsy, and this is the lower figure is aspiration spear. Aspiration spear. So in these figures, we can see that whole of the bone marrow, maximum part of the bone marrow is replaced by fat, and very little cells are present. So replacement of hematopoietic tissue by fat, and only residual stromal and lymphoid cells are left. So which cells are left? Only stromal and lymphoid cells are left in aplastic anemia. Now when we consider the epidemiology, males and females are affected with equal frequency. That is, male is equals to female. But this disease has biphasic age distribution. Biphasic age distribution means that is, there are two peaks. So the major peak, that is the most common age group, is teenage, especially in the 20s of their age. And there is a second rise in old age as well. Now coming on to the etiology of aplastic anemia, it can be either acquired or due to inherited or constitutional disorders. So acquired aplastic anemia most commonly is due to idiopathic. On the other hand, secondary causes include radiation, drugs and chemicals, viruses, immunological diseases, paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria, pregnancy. On the other hand, inherited or constitutional disorders, there are certain syndromes which we will discuss in detail one by one. First, let's discuss how radiation causes aplastic anemia. Now, meroaplasia is the major acute sequelae of radiation. Now, what happens is that radiation causes DNA damage. DNA damage. Now, the tissues which are dependent on active mitosis are particularly susceptible, like hematopoietic cells. Now, this can occur during nuclear accidents and can affect a variety of people like power plant workers, hospital employees, laboratory employees, and employees of some industries like food sterilization or metal radiographers. So, occupational history is very important in evaluating for the etiology of aplastic anemia if we are considering radiation exposure. Now, why we are saying that radiation acutely leads to aplastic anemia? Because radiation also causes leukemia, and this is a long-term effect of radiation. That is, leukemia is not caused acutely just after the exposure to radiation. Now coming on to the second cause, that is chemicals. So the most important chemical which can lead to aplastic anemia is benzene. It can lead to aplastic anemia. It can also cause acute leukemia and blood and bone marrow abnormalities. So it can lead to a variety of bone marrow disorders. Now benzene was used as solvent, but it is no longer available as household solvent. But how can this exposure occur? Now this exposure can occur to its metabolites through normal diet, environment, or certain drugs like quinolones. Now for leukemia to occur, susceptible individual should have cumulative exposure to benzene. Cumulative exposure. This means that single exposure will not lead to leukemia. Also, the leukemia will not develop in everyone who is having cumulative exposure. So both the features should be present, that is, the individual should be susceptible and there should be cumulative exposure. Now coming on to the drugs. Many chemotherapeutics can lead to marrow suppression. Now the effect is either dose dependent, that is their regular effect, or it can be an idiosyncratic reaction. Dose dependent effect occurs in all recipients. These occur in all recipients. On the other hand, idiosyncratic reactions occur without a clear dose response relationship. So what drugs can lead to aplastic anemia? There can be agents that regularly produce marrow depression at major toxicity in commonly used doses or normal exposures. So these can be cytotoxic drugs like used in cancer chemotherapy, like alkylating agents, anti-metabolites, anti-mitotics, some antibiotics. So it is very usual for them to cause aplastic anemia. There are some agents that frequently but not inevitably produce meroaplasia. This is benzene, which we have already discussed. And then there are certain agents which are associated with aplastic anemia, but with a very relatively low probability. These include commonly used drugs like chloramphenicol, insecticides, antiprotozoals like quinaquine, chloroquine, non-steroidal NSAIDs including indomethacin, aspirin, anticonvulsants, sulfonamides, antihistaminics, D-penicillamine, and estrogens. So this table is very important. All these drugs can lead to aplastic anemia. Now coming on to the next etiology, that is infections. So infections including hepatitis, infectious mononucleosis, parvovirus B19, and HIV virus 1 can lead to aplastic anemia. So hepatitis, post hepatitis marrow failure, this is a term. This accounts for 5% of all the cases of aplastic anemia. So the patient are usually young men who recovered from a bout of liver inflammation 1 to 2 months earlier. The hepatitis is typically seronegative, that is non-A, non-B, non-C. Now this is very important point, that seronegative hepatitis leads to aplastic anemia. Now aplastic anemia can also rarely follow infectious mononucleosis, which is caused by Epstein-Barr virus. Now parvovirus B19 do not as such cause generalized bone marrow failure, but transient mild blood count depression can be seen with many viral and bacterial infections, including parvovirus B19. Now HIV-1 virus can also lead to aplastic anemia. Now when we consider the immune diseases, aplasia is a major consequence and inevitable cause of death in transfusion associated graft versus host disease. So this occurs when non-irradiated blood products are given to immunodeficient recipient. So now aplastic anemia is strongly associated with eosinophilic fasciitis. This is a very rare collagen vascular syndrome which is characterized by painful induration of subcutaneous nodules. Now thymoma and hypoimmunoglobulinemia are occasionally associated with aplastic anemia. SLE can also lead to pancytopenia with marrow hypoplasia. Now coming on to the pregnancy, aplastic anemia very rarely may occur or reoccur during the pregnancy. Also importantly, it resolves after the delivery or after the abortion. Whether the abortion is spontaneous or induced, it will resolve after delivery or the abortion. Now paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria is interlinked to aplastic anemia. Now it occurs due to acquired mutation in PIGA gene. This occurs due to acquired mutation in PIGA gene, and these abnormal hematopoietic stem cells will proliferate. Now the progeny is deficient in glycosyl phosphatidyl inositol linked cell surface membrane proteins. This leads to typical intravascular hemolysis seen in patients of PNH. Now it is very important to note that half of the aplastic anemia patients also show small clones of deficient cells by flow cytometry. This cell surface proteins are also deficient in half of the patients of aplastic anemia. On the other hand, PNH patients, when we do bone marrow studies in such patients, these also show defective hematopoiesis like aplastic anemia, and these can later develop frank aplastic anemia. Therefore, both these disorders are interlinked, and any one disorder can lead to other disorder. And basically, now one important point is that suppose there is a patient of aplastic anemia, and after giving the therapy there is complete recovery in such patient. Now this patient can later develop hemolytic paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria, since both these disorders are very closely linked to each other. Now friends, after we have discussed the acquired causes, now let's discuss some constitutional or inherited disorders. So we will discuss Fanconi anemia, dyskeratosis congenita, and Shawman-Diamond syndrome. So first of all, let's discuss Fanconi anemia. So Fanconi anemia is a autosomal recessive disorder. It is characterized by congenital developmental anomalies, progressive pancytopenia, and increased risk of malignancy. So the congenital anomalies include short stature, cafe au lait spots, anomalies of thumb radius and genitourinary tract. Now, total 17 genetic defects have been identified which are responsible for Fanconi anemia. But the most common type of Fanconi anemia is type A. Type A. This occurs due to mutation in FANCA gene, so that the cellular response to DNA damage cannot take place in such patients. Now the second disorder is dyskeratosis congenita. So it is a triad of mucous membrane leukoplakia, dystrophic nails, and reticular hyperpigmentation. So in these patients with the triad of this condition, there is development of aplastic anemia. This is known as dyskeratosis congenita. Now this is due to mutations in gene of telomere repair complex, which acts to maintain the telomere length in replicating cells. So this disorder can be X-linked due to mutations in DKC1 gene, that is dyskerrin gene, or it can be autosomal dominant. Now autosomal dominant can be due to mutation of TERC gene and TERT gene. Now this TERC gene encodes for RNA template and TERT gene encodes for catalytic reverse transcriptase, that is telomerase. Now other than these mutations, there can also be a mutation of TNF2 gene, which codes for sheltrin protein. So this was about dyskeratosis congenita. Now coming on to the third disorder, that is Shawman-Diamond syndrome. It is characterized by early life neutropenia, pancreatic insufficiency, and malabsorption. And the mutation involved in this disorder is SBDS gene mutation. Now other than constitutional disorders, telomeropathies can also occur in adults. So these are due to same mutations, that is TERT gene, which encodes telomerase, and TERC gene, which encodes for RNA template. Now the important point is that in these adults, the physical anomalies will be absent, as in constitutional disorders like Fanconi anemia, dyskeratosis congenita, and Shawman-Diamond syndrome. Physical anomalies will be absent. So what will be the clue then? Early graying of hairs. Early graying of hairs gives clue to the diagnosis of telomeropathies. Also, if we inquire about family history, there can be family history of pulmonary fibrosis and hepatic cirrhosis in such patients in whom we are suspecting telomeropathies. So physical anomalies are absent, early graying of hairs, and family history of pulmonary fibrosis and hepatic cirrhosis. Now this is a patient of Fanconi syndrome. Characteristically, there is short stature, and we can see anomalies involving thumb, and there is absent radius. In this slide, this is a patient of dyskeratosis congenita with characteristic dystrophic nails, mucous membrane leukoplakia, and there is reticular hyperpigmentation. So aplastic anemia is very common in such patients. Now after we have discussed the etiology in detail, let's come to the pathophysiology of aplastic anemia. So bone marrow failure results from severe damage to hepatopoietic cell compartment. Now in aplastic anemia, there is replacement of bone marrow by the fat. So this can be seen either on bone marrow biopsy, or we can do MRI spine to see that there is only fat present in the marrow. Similarly, CD34 is an antigen which is a marker of early hematopoietic stem cells. These CD34 bearing cells are greatly diminished. So these are just hematopoietic cells. So we can check this via this CD34 marker also. Now hematopoietic cells in the bone marrow are normally in 30 to 70% concentration, and in aplastic anemia these are reduced to less than 25%. In very severe and severe diseases, these are reduced to only less than 1%, and there is only and only fat left. Now, when we consider the pathophysiology of constitutional genetic syndromes, there is intrinsic stem cell defect for constitutional aplastic anemias. For example, in Fanconi's anemia, these exhibit chromosome damage and death on exposure to certain chemical agents, and this cannot be repaired due to gene mutation. Also, telomeres shorten in certain constitutional as well as acquired disorders. Now, when we consider the pathophysiology of chemical and drug injury, high dose toxic chemicals as well as radiations leads to extrinsic damage to marrow. On the other hand, there is idiosyncratic reaction to some drugs due to altered drug metabolism. Now, certain drugs can lead to aplastic anemia by forming very highly reactive metabolites. For example, hydroxychloroquine, hydroquinolone, these will all form benzene as a metabolite, which will lead to benzene induced tissue injury, that is bone marrow suppression. So benzene can be formed as a metabolite which is very high likely to cause bone marrow suppression. Now, how does immune mediated stem cell destruction occur? There is increased number of activated cytotoxic T cells which are observed in aplastic anemia, and these decline with successful treatment. So these are responsible for the bone marrow damage. When we talk about cytokines, type 1 cytokines are implicated in aplastic anemia, and interferon gamma especially leads to fast expression on CD34 cells. CD34 cells means stem cells. So this fast expression is responsible for the apoptosis. So this interferon gamma leads to fast expression on CD34, leading to apoptosis of the hematopoietic stem cells. Now, after we have discussed the pathophysiology, let's come on to the clinical features, which include history as well as physical examination. So first of all, we will discuss the history. So aplastic anemia usually has abrupt or insidious onset. Now, bleeding is the most common early symptom, and the patients complain of easy bruising, oozing from gums, nosebleed, heavy menstrual bleed, or petechiae. Now, thrombocytopenia can also lead to intracranial as well as retinal hemorrhages. Now, patient also complain of symptoms of anemia like lassitude, weakness, shortness of breath. Infection is very unusually a first symptom. So it is seen in late stages, unlike agranulocytosis. In agranulocytosis, infection is a early finding which can present with pharyngitis, anorectal infection, or frank sepsis. The patient usually look generally good despite their drastically decreased blood counts. Now, past history is also important in aplastic anemia. There can be past history of any drug, chemical, or radiation exposure, or a preceding viral illness such as hepatitis. What can we gather through family history? Now, family history of any hematological disease, blood abnormalities, pulmonary fibrosis, liver cirrhosis, and early graying of hairs, these point towards telomeropathies. Telomeropathies, that is defect in telomeres. On the other hand, if the patient has family history of unusual infection and warts, this points towards GATA2 deficiency. So this was all about history. Now let's come on to the physical examination. Now physical examination can reveal petechiae and ecchymosis. Also, we can see retinal hemorrhages in some cases. If we do fundoscopy, we can see retinal hemorrhages. But petechiae and ecchymosis are typical of aplastic anemia. Now, pelvic and rectal examination should be performed with great gentleness to avoid any trauma, and it may show bleeding from cervical os, or there can be blood in stools as well. Pallor is very common finding. Now, typical findings like cafe au lait spots and short stature, this will make the diagnosis of Fanconi's anemia. Peculiar dystrophic nails with mucous membrane leukoplakia, this will point towards dyskeratosis congenita, and early graying of hairs can point towards telomerase defect. Telomerase defect. Now coming on to the laboratory studies, we will first see the peripheral smear, then bone marrow examination, and then specific test. So in peripheral smear, there are presence of large erythrocytes, that is increased size of erythrocytes with their increased mean corpuscular volume. There is decreased number of platelets and granulocytes. Reticulocytes are very few or even absent, and lymphocytes are normal in number or can be decreased somewhat. Now, differential diagnosis on peripheral smear, if we are seeing immature myeloid cells, there can be a possibility of leukemia or myelodysplastic syndrome. If we are seeing nucleated RBCs, there can be myelofibrosis or tumor invasion. If we are seeing abnormal platelets, either there can be myelodysplastic syndrome or peripheral destruction of platelets. Now coming on to bone marrow examination, it can be done either by aspiration or biopsy, that is trephine biopsy. Now aspiration is very dilute on smear, so the investigation of choice is trephine biopsy. Now the biopsy specimen is grossly pale on withdrawal. Ideal biopsy specimen should be more than 1 centimeter in size, and when we examine this specimen, the hematopoietic stem cells are only less than 25% of the marrow space, and sometimes biopsy is virtually all fat. Sometimes there is nothing other than fat. Now during biopsy, the differential diagnosis can be, if we getting a dry tap, it can be either myelofibrosis or myelophthisis, and if we are seeing granulomas on examination, there can be possibility of certain infective etiology. Now when we consider the specific test, we can go with chromosome studies. Now these chromosome studies can either be done on peripheral smear or bone marrow cells. Now on peripheral smears, we can do chromosome breakage studies with either diepoxy butane or mitomycin C. So this test can be done in children and young adults to exclude Fanconi's anemia. Now chromosome studies in bone marrow cells, when we perform, these are positive in myelodysplastic syndrome and are usually negative in typical aplastic anemia. Other test is nucleotide sequencing. In nucleotide sequencing, if we are getting very short telomere length, then it can be due to presence of telomerase, or there can be a shelterin mutation. Either there can be presence of telomerase enzyme or shelterin mutation. So nucleotide sequencing is helping in this way. Flow cytometry can help in very well diagnosing PNH, that is paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria. Serological studies can be done for viruses like Epstein-Barr virus causing infectious mononucleosis or HIV. On the other hand, hepatitis leading to aplastic anemia is typically seronegative. MRI can also be done for checking the fat content, and therefore we can differentiate between aplastic anemia and myelodysplastic syndrome with the help of fat content. Now coming on to diagnosis. The diagnosis of aplastic anemia is straightforward, that is aplastic anemia is equals to pancytopenia plus fatty bone marrow. Now it is a disease of young, so it should be a leading diagnosis in adolescent or young adult who is presenting with pancytopenia. Now it is important to differentiate between acquired cause versus constitutional cause and aplastic anemia from myelodysplastic syndrome. So acquired versus constitutional is very difficult to distinguish by the bone marrow. It is usually indistinguishable, except only one cause, that is GATA2 deficiency, which has typical bone marrow finding, that is presence of atypical megakaryocytes. In GATA2 deficiency, there is presence of atypical megakaryocytes. So how can we differentiate then? The differentiation can only be made by family history. There can be family history, abnormal blood counts since childhood, or physical anomalies if present. Like in Fanconi's anemia. Now how to differentiate between aplastic and MDS? It is again difficult to differentiate aplastic anemia from hypocellular myelodysplastic syndrome. So the diagnosis of MDS is favored by morphological abnormalities as well as cytogenetic abnormalities. Cytogenetic testing, if we do, then there will be cytogenetic abnormalities. So what morphological abnormalities are present in MDS? There is presence of megakaryocytes and myeloid precursor cells, which are absent in aplastic anemia. Now when we consider the prognosis of aplastic anemia, the natural history of severe aplastic anemia is rapid deterioration and death, but some patients show spontaneous recovery. So what is the major prognostic determinant? It is the blood counts. So severe aplastic anemia, if someone asks, is characterized by presence of 2 out of these 3 parameters. Either the absolute neutrophil count is less than 500 per millimeter cube, platelet count is less than 20,000, and absolute retic count is less than 60,000, or corrected retic count is less than 1%. So if 2 out of 3 of these is present, then it is a severe aplastic anemia. Now coming on to the very important part of this lecture, that is treatment of aplastic anemia. So severe aplastic anemia can be cured by stem cell transplantation, or it can be ameliorated by suppression of immune system. Now this suppression of immune system will help in the recovery of residual bone marrow. Also, if there is some suspect drug or chemical intake present, it should be discontinued. So first let's discuss a very important topic, that is stem cell transplantation. So this stem cell transplant is best for younger patients with fully histocompatible sibling donor available. Now in these patients we have to do HLA typing, HLA matching. Also in transplant candidates, transfusion of blood from the family member should be avoided. We have to avoid the transfusion of blood from the family member because this will lead to HLA sensitization, and we have to avoid this HLA sensitization to avoid failure of the bone marrow transplant. Now the transplant mortality and morbidity are higher in case of adults. If we are doing it in younger patients, it is good, but failure is higher in adults because there is increased risk of chronic graft versus host disease as well as infections in adults. Now we have got increased survival even with unrelated donor transplant due to high resolution HLA matching, effective conditioning regimens, and graft versus host disease prophylaxis. Cord blood can be used as a source of stem cells in children. HLA haploidentical family donor can be used. Post-transplant cyclophosphamide is effective in preventing graft versus host disease, and regimens now do not include post-transplant radiation because it can lead to late occurrence of cancer. It can lead to late cancer like leukemia. Now the second modality is immunosuppression. So the typical regimen includes anti-thymocyte globulin along with cyclosporin, and this regimen can produce recovery in 60 to 70% of the patients. Now the dose of horse anti-thymocyte globulin is 40 milligram per kg. Infusion is given for 4 days. On the other hand, the dose of cyclosporin is 12 milligram per kg orally. So it is started in the high dose, then it is adjusted accordingly. Now prognosis is better in case of children than adults. There is improvement in granulocyte number within 2 months of treatment, and this is telling that patient is responsive to treatment. Now serum sickness with flu-like illness, cutaneous eruptions and arthralgia develops after 10 days of initiation treatment, and for this we can give the patient methylprednisolone. Methylprednisolone can be given to ameliorate immune consequence due to heterogeneous protein since we are giving horse ATG. Now there are certain complications. After giving the immunosuppressive regimen, there can be relapse, that is there can be recurrent pancytopenia, and this usually occurs when the cyclosporin is discontinued. That is, these patients become cyclosporin dependent. Also there can be development of myelodysplastic syndrome in 15% of the treated patients, and which can later develop leukemia. So the crux is that the older patient do good with anti-thymocyte globulin with cyclosporin, and if we have a children or young adult, bone marrow transplant is suitable if we have a donor, which should be preferably a sibling. So older patients do good with this immunosuppression, and younger patients and children do good with bone marrow transplantation. Now some other therapies. First of all, hematopoietic growth factors, erythropoietin and granulocyte colony stimulating factor, these all are ineffective in aplastic anemia. Also thrombopoietin is already elevated in patients of aplastic anemia, but surprisingly a thrombopoietic mimetic, that is L-Trombopag is approved for refractory aplastic anemia, and it also shows response in aplastic anemia. So when added to first line immunosuppression, it markedly increases the overall response. Now androgens can also be prescribed in such patients because sex hormone is said to increase telomere activity in vitro, and we can give a 3 to 4 months trial, especially in patients with telomere gene defect, which can improve the blood counts in such patients. So drug which can be used is danazol. Now coming on to the last slide of this lecture, supportive care. So supportive care regarding infection should be done, especially in patients of neutropenia. So in such patients, we have to give broad spectrum antibiotics, which should be empirically based, and we should not wait for the culture results. If the antibiotics are not giving this response, we can use antifungals, because infection with candida and aspergillus are very common in such patients. We can also do granulocyte transfusion using GCSF modified peripheral blood. We can transfuse these patients with granulocyte. Also, a very neglected practice is hand washing. Hand washing is a very neglected practice, but it is single best method of preventing the infection. Now when we consider the transfusion of packed red blood cells should be done if the hemoglobin is less than 7 gram per deciliter or the patient has underlying cardiac or pulmonary disease. So we need at least 2 units every 2 weeks of packed red blood cell transfusion, which will be able to replace the normal losses in a non-functional bone marrow patient. After 50 transfusions, after every 50th transfusion, we have to give iron chelators like deferoxamine and deferesirox to avoid secondary hemochromatosis. Now, platelets should be maintained above the level of 10,000, and menstruation should be suppressed with the help of drugs, and NSAIDs including aspirin should be avoided in patients of aplastic anemia.